Throughout the history of broadcasting, the UK has always had a heavier hand in regulation in the US. The monopoly status of the BBC, the very careful way in which the British public care about their broadcasting and feel ownership of it, has led to a lot higher tolerance for regulation. And that's certainly the case we'll see while we're there. An organization called Ofcom regulates most electronic media in the UK. All of the commercial media, whether it's terrestrial, satellite, online, governed by Ofcom, and some elements of the BBC. Now, they call their regulation light touch there, but we'll see it's a lot heavier than what we have in the U.S. There's an interesting thing in the UK called the watershed that they take particularly seriously. The watershed, a safe harbor for content, sexually explicit content, that changes after 9 p.m. When you watch television, you will see that there's a pretty radical change in content. After 9 p.m., you're going to see things you would never see on American television. And the British are much less sensitive about nudity and sexual content than we prudish Americans. But they don't like violence to the extent we do. So you'll see a lot less violence on British television. But open your eyes a little bit to see what content there is after the watershed. Some argue that this is an anachronism. Kids don't necessarily go to bed at 9 o'clock, and it's an artificial distinction. We have something similar in the United States, but it doesn't get nearly as much attention as in the UK because that demarcation really does change the content after 9 p.m. This is a humorous account of how a parent has criticized something that appeared before the watershed. I don't know how common this type of complaint is, but it certainly shows the intensity of the complainers who take the watershed seriously. The BBC has always regulated itself, or did up until a scandal a few years ago. And the British public seemed to tolerate this for many years. It was, after all, the BBC, the organization that John Reith built, that took itself very seriously. So it was always assumed that this Board of Governors could regulate itself. That's not the case anymore. It's somewhat viewed as a matter of the fox guarding the hen house. How could one board both regulate the BBC and plan its financial direction, set the compensation of its executives, and make the decision that we're in the BBC's own self-interest? Now there are two boards. There's the BBC Trust, which is the regulator for the BBC, and then there's still a board that runs the BBC internally. And Ofcom has a limited regulatory authority, but not a great deal. The BBC has always taken great pride in its ability to set high standards for itself, to explicitly direct its producers and editorial employees on how they should behave in certain situations. An example of that is the Producers Guidelines, a pretty thick book on how producers should do their work. Many organizations in the world in broadcasting use the BBC Producer Guidelines because they're so complete, so explicit, and so helpful in almost any kind of situation. In a broader policy sense, the BBC relies on the editorial guidelines. These are broad-based things the BBC strives for in its daily work. And one of them I want to bring your attention to in particular, and that is impartiality. You won't find a Fox News or an MSNBC in the UK because the impartiality guideline mandates that there be no particular partisan opinion on television. News is news, as objective as possible. And that governs things in a way that we're not used to in the U.S. Some of the others are very similar to what we have, the protection of children, accuracy, and certain aspects of privacy. Some people think there are no ratings in the UK, but that's not true. There's a very sophisticated rating service there called BARB, the British Audience Research Board. The people meters were actually invented in England, what we use now by Nielsen to measure audience. The BBC pays close attention to its audiences, not because it wants to make a profit, but because it is interested in pursuing its mandate of serving all the people in the UK. And they can tell through the ratings how popular a program is and whether it's reaching the audiences for which it was intended. Now, the viewing share, BBC's and ITV, have been pretty static through the years. BBC One is the top channel. ITV, Channel 3, is the second most popular channel. BBC Two and Channel 4 follow at about 10% of the audience each, somewhere between 5 and 10%. And then the multi-channel universe of Sky News is somewhere above BBC Two and Channel 4, but below BBC One and ITV.